Okay, hello and welcome to this H&V News live webinar hosted in association with Altecnic. I am H&V editor Neil Merritt, and our theme for the day is the domestic and commercial case for hybrid heating. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us for what's going to be, I think, a pretty informative series of discussions and presentation, trying to understand how hybrid heating might fit into wider discussions around net zero. As luck, perhaps, or not for some MPs would have it, this today has coincided, obviously, with the news of an upcoming general election. And while I'm not sure we're quite at the stage yet, just where the exact nature of heating systems are going to sway polling, I think we're all aware that there is real significance on many lives linked to the energy costs and the environmental impact of our homes and how we're living our lives at the minute. So to understand where things lie as we look for a spot of electioneering, I'm pleased to say we have a broad panel of experts to talk about some of the technical and policy considerations that will determine how heat pumps might be combined with other systems. Some of the discussion points I think we're likely to be looking at, we'll look at the different technology options and heat sources that might lend themselves to being combined with heat pumps, and also looking at areas of skills and maintenance requirements to deliver an effective overall performance when we're looking at hybrid heating as a discussion. So we're going to start today with a panel discussion around the policy and skills issues. So I'd like to ask our first panel to join us and welcome them. Delighted to say we have Katrina Young, Practice Manager at Energy Systems Catapult, Ellie Hiscock, Consulting Engineer with Fairheat, and Ed Morris, Technical Manager at Altecnic. So thank you guys, and thank you for joining us, hopefully on this timely policy discussion that we're going to have today. I was going to start, I guess, getting a lie of the land and where we're setting that there. When we're looking at this broad issue as a starting point, I was going to go from the own experiences of your work. Where at the minute are we thinking that industry might most benefit from offering hybrid technologies, either where that's happening now or perhaps where there might be a real sort of strong case for building this technology further. I was going to ask as well if there's sort of sufficient policy or support at the minute to encourage these systems. Thought if I bring Katrina in first and go through the panel on that, just to get some thoughts about where we stand at present.
Sure, thanks, Neil. So I'm going to pick up your second question first, if that's all right.
Sure, that's fine. I threw a few in just to get us started on that.
So the policy support, hybrids currently fall out of the major one for heat pumps, which is the boiler upgrade scheme. So you can't get the £7,500 grant that you can for air source and ground source and water source heat pumps. So at the moment it does raise a much larger upfront capital cost to consumers to go down the hybrid route. That's not to say that it couldn't change in the future, but it is a difficult policy proposition to work out how you couldn't game the system, as it were, to go down the hybrid route without actually decarbonising the system and run it as a gas boiler the whole time. Kind of parallel to the concerns we had around hybrid electric vehicles, that you could get subsidies for hybrid cars, but then they were finding that the charger for the electric cars was actually still in the packaging, the boot, unused for years because you run it as a normal car. So that starting point is quite different. From the current applications, so Energy Systems Catapult, we ran a electrification of heat demonstrator project starting a few years ago in partnership with DESNZ, the government, and this installed a range of heat pumps in a range of all housing archetypes, and to first demonstrate that heat pumps can work in all types of housing. And we did also install hybrid heat pumps, as far as I remember, about 100 hybrid heat pumps, and those are mostly installed in pre-1919 mid-terrace housing, particularly where there were space constraints. If you couldn't have the external part of the heat pump, then hybrids were put in there. So that is one, in my mind, for housing at the moment, that would be one of the main applications would be for space constraints. And so you can get the immediate decarbonization as a kind of a stepping stone without getting rid of your gas boiler straight away. And if you don't have the resources of space to go complete to a heat pump, that would be one of the main routes that I'd see.
Brilliant, that's great, thank you. I mean, it'd be interesting. I wonder if stepping stone, whether it's the right term or not, might be a term we sort of hear a lot during the discussion on that one today. If I can move across to Ellie there, and for a bit from your experiences at Fairheat and things at the minute, I was wondering how, if at all at the minute, hybrids, building on what Katrina was sort of saying about some of the trials and things, how hybrids is or isn't sort of factoring into what you're looking at.
Yeah, so certainly from like a district heating scheme, and where we've typically seen sort of gas boilers and centralized energy centres and CHPs, and we're now moving from that gas connection to decarbonised buildings, and we're seeing heat pumps becoming that option. And just sort of as what Katrina was saying with space, heat pumps are significantly, they're more expensive and they require much greater footprint than boilers when we're looking at it per kilowatt. So what we're sort of looking at now is actually you can deliver a very large portion of your annual demand to a development for a relatively small heating capacity. So we're sort of, some of the stuff that we've been looking into and actually developing kind of rules of thumbs to help designers in early design stages, because sort of footprint, considering that on really early in the design is like really critical, especially for sort of current developments now. So being able to set that kind of rule of thumb heat pump sizing early on, so roughly an example of getting a 95% heat annual target delivered by your heat pump might only require it to be sized to around 40 to 45% of your total peak load of your system. So that's like really critical when we're thinking of this hybrid approach versus heat pump and the actual significant difference in capex. But one thing that's also, I'd say, really interesting but really critical to think about when we're obviously pushing to decarbonize existing buildings is that we couldn't all be electric tomorrow. There just isn't the grid capacity. So actually we're able to decarbonize existing buildings, integrate them pretty quickly and see those sort of low carbon sort of targets being met, while providing that top up, as it were, by your gas. So even though we are moving away from gas, that's actually going to provide quite a critical sort of interim in seeing that transition into decarbonising and moving to electric, and also electric boilers in the future as well.
That's brilliant. It seems quite an interesting, almost there's an element of perception a bit there as well here about, you know, it's the compromise or stepping stone, that transitional tech on that one there. I was going to bring Ed Morris from Altecnic in as well. In talking about this question, obviously from the side of the supply chain side and Altecnic's work here at the moment, building on what we've been sort of talking about, where at the moment, both domestically or commercially, is hybrid sort of fitting in, or perhaps do you hope where hybrid might fit in as we look forward to net zero and trying to make this transition?
Yeah, I think, you know, sort of touching on what Ellie was saying before, we do a lot of work within sort of district heating and stuff. I think that's probably where we're seeing our biggest change, because it's an industry that we spend a lot of time in. So, you know, we are starting to see these hybrid systems. And I think what's ultimately important is understanding the limitations of the technology that we've got. You know, if a heat pump, you know, as Ellie quite said, will be sized to provide a majority of the heat load at any one time, there's obviously still that peak demand, but that might only be for, you know, 4 or 5% of the time. So how do we counteract that? You know, there's obviously different technologies that we can use. which can sort of almost add as a top up, which obviously can add to the sort of carbon reduction and everything that we're looking at. But I think from a manufacturer's perspective, we sort of have to understand the technologies which are involved, whether it be a heat pump, whether it be CHP, whether it be gas fired, whether it be electric. And predominantly Altecnic as a manufacturer, we're a valve manufacturer. We take control of the hydronic system. So when we've got a system designed and we understand where the water needs to go, how it needs to get there, we can offer a solution for that. So it's important for us to stay on top of the technology, to work with manufacturers, to work with industry leaders and industry bodies to understand where we are moving to, so that we can offer the solutions once we've got a design within a system to be able to do that. So yeah, two-sided thing, understand the limitations of the technology that we've already got, the limitations of the equipment that we've got, and working out the best way I think that we can, as an industry, move forward and work together. So I come from an industry of, I was an installer by trade many years ago, where we used to build energy centres or plant rooms, as we sort of more fondly called them back then. And we would just produce as much heat as we could, with the biggest boilers we could, with as much pipe work as we could, and then we'd just work out, once we've got that, how we're going to use that heat. Didn't really mind if it was wasted, whatever it may be. But I think the way that the mindset's changed now and policy is changing is that we have to embrace that, and everything is becoming smaller. Footprint is still a huge issue. I would say, things like heat pumps do take up more of a footprint, so retrofit, can be a little bit more challenging, I guess. But yeah, we just got to be a bit more switched on, I think, and a bit more aware of how we're using the technology we've got, and how technologies can work together to give us a better solution. I think one of the panelists said before, we are moving away from gas, but it's still got a part to play. I think somewhere, we're still going to need that gas connection to do it. And you look at, say for instance, electrical generation. So we need electricity to run heat pumps and stuff like that. But what is that generation? We talk about green energy, we talk about green, power being produced. But if it's still coming from a gas-fired plant where we produce electricity, is your COP as efficient? If you're running off a COP of 4, but your electricity is coming from a gas-fired plant, does that reduce your COP? Things like that. So there's a bigger picture. I think we can look at heat pumps and say, they are the future, they're green, but you've also got to look at the considerations, think of the energy that we're producing around it for the heat pumps to run. So maybe the considerations like CHP and that come into play there.
That's brilliant. I mean, we're talking about that. I think that probably leans into my next question for the panel, and I'll start with you, if I may, just about I guess market readiness really at the moment. When we've obviously there's an interesting case right now, and especially as we think about sort of governments and commitments of what the best routes to net zero are. But when we are making the case for hybrid, how ready are we, do you think, at the moment, from some of your work into the partnerships, when people are coming with solutions? Obviously, something like Altecnic will be looking to support that there. But is there a readiness? Is there an understanding and ability to deliver this, or is this really just built-in skills that are already there? It's just the application of them. Would you?
I think it's a bit of an open question. So when we say the market's ready, who is the market? Is the market the consumer? Is it the end user who's consuming the heat? Is it say for instance, the network owner, so somebody who takes liability and responsibility for the network to run efficiently? Is it an installer? There's a whole raft of questions I think that need to be answered when we say, are we, as the industry ready? Because there's so many key players that need to be ready. From a technology perspective, hybrid systems have been around for years, the same as heat pumps have been around for years. We're just looking at the technology in different ways now, I think, and we are starting to embrace it. And I know, we do some work alongside Fairheat on different things, and the change in the mindset, I think, of how we look at systems, and where we would see maybe 10 years ago, you see a hybrid system as a failure because you've installed some equipment which can't cope with the complete demand. So that would be classed as a failure. Whereas now, if we look at hybrid system and say, okay, well, we've got, this is the limitation of this, we can bolt this onto it and it's still going to be efficient, then I think that then is now seen as a success. So are we just ready? I think so. I think we've been ready for a number of years, but I still do think we miss maybe a higher level of understanding and maybe of engineering, to get it driven through. We've got such a huge pool of really good engineers, Katrina, Ellie, these sort of people who are really pushing us forward in the industry, but we need more of it to get more, I think, more clout behind it to push it forward a bit further, I think.
Brilliant. So I'm going to come back through with the name checks there, but Ellie, from yourself there, and apologies, this is always me with a limited technical understanding on these, but you know, that idea of market readiness, and I guess the capability at the moment that we have to provide that is that a bit too simplification? As we said, hybrids have been around, so when we're talking about next steps or perceptions of that, but you know, what are we doing as an industry to provide this, or do we need there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the transition into hybrid skills shouldn't be anything sort of above and beyond sort of the capability of engineers and operatives that are already working within this sector. But actually, and well, it's key to sort of note, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel as well. We already have a lot of very good examples of hybrid systems that are working, and we possibly just need to have more data, sort of operational data would be really key in this, and more sort of learnings that are actually being fed back into early on design stages, and actually being able to ensure that the industry is sort of going, or all going up together, and accepting that it is a big change. I mean, and as Ed was saying, sort of when everything was oversized, and there is that change, and there is that whole change in mindset as well, and just making sure that we're getting engagement from all levels, sort of designers through to on-site commissioning, installation, and maintenance, that all of those parts are going to play a really big role in sort of optimizing the hybrid solutions. Possibly what I mentioned before about sizing is really critical early on. CP1 talks about for sizing your heat pump and your boilers, you should be carrying an hourly load model out for this. What we've seen in sort of quite a bit of the work that we've done is this isn't always being done, or might just not being done correctly. So potentially there might be a little bit of a gap in this area specifically, and more guidance within this might help guide those key design decisions really early on. But when I talk about hourly load modelling, it's not very expensive software or very extensive training. I mean, it's modelling that we do that can be done in Excel. So it's more just a guide for that. So yeah, it's nothing certainly that's above and beyond what we already have. Another thing that we possibly do see a bit of a gap in is controls. So we've got the design working, we've been involved in design stages, and we've got the design exactly where we need it to be, things are sized correctly, but actually if that's not implemented on site with the correct understanding of the controls and maximizing our low carbon heat source, then we're just going to be sort of backtracking again. So yeah, there's definitely a few things that the industry is certainly very capable of, but I think, yeah, data gathering and as feeding that back in is going to be really key for implementing hybrid going forwards.
That's really interesting. I mean, it seems, as you were saying, I think some of the wider discussions that we're already having about heat pumps, and even on the boiler side about how we're using it, you know, and as I said, the days of this big, you know, we'll oversize it so it can handle anything. Yeah. It seems really that some of these, that perhaps hybrids aren't going to be this way of, oh, you don't have to quite worry about the level of design you need for heat pumps. We're still talking really about, you said, that design and understanding how best that fits in. I mean, Katrina, coming to yourself on that sort of topic here of market readiness, I know you've mentioned the electrification of heat has already been looking at, compared to, along with standalone systems, hybrid in there. So in terms of how that factored in, I suppose in terms of the decisions for, you know, around the, as you said, around 170 or so hybrids that were tested with that government funded study there, I was wondering, you know, how is there any change in what's needed, or is, you know, in terms of the capabilities, was that something that had factored into some of the research there about using them well, using them effectively?
So that was one of the interesting findings that we had, was the hybrid heat pumps in the electrification of heat demonstration project had on average a lower COP, a lower SPF than standalone air source heat pumps. And there's a couple of reasons we think why this happened. And one, I think the big one was about the control issues and the explanation and training, as it were, to the people that got the system, so the consumers, is that, and this is also needed for heat pump installations, it is a different way of running your heating system than like the gas boiler that people are familiar with. And having the hybrid system can be more complex for people to understand. And so we think that that was one of the issues is about the operating, how it runs. It was also during the project, there was the shift towards R290 as the F-gas, and a lot of the hybrid systems that were installed were still running on older F-gases. So that could be part of it as well. But the awareness of the consumers, we think, is a big part of getting the performance as best as possible.
So it's kind of it's the usual, it's sort of awareness from the consumer side, and I guess looking at sort of installers and maintenance side as well about how they're being maintained, or controls, as you mentioned, that wider understanding of how this is all going to work there. I was going to ask, I mean, while we're on that subject of awareness, we were going to come round to Katrina, but also as you mentioned, the skills side, I was wondering in terms of from electrification of heat and other studies, and I know there's been a lot of work that Energy Systems Catapult's looked at as well there. How, in that skills side, we mentioned earlier, is this a consistent message about that applies much as it would to heat pumps? So I was wondering what some of those skills considerations were with effective design, with getting the best from both sides of the technology there, and had that sort of factored in those discussions, or in the research you've been doing since, about what's needed, or what was perhaps different from perhaps some of the training we're already putting in for the standalone tech?
The results of the performance of the heat pumps in the project varied quite a lot, and varied from the design COP as well. And so this is one of the things that we'll be looking at and we think is an important learning for industry, is that design stage and getting the performance delivered to match that. And we know there's some organizations that have that promise, that say that if the performance isn't meeting what we designed, we'll come back and make improvements to it. And so that, from the quality of installation, but also the number of heat pump installers we know has to increase significantly. I think about 60,000 is what's needed to deliver the from the scale of ramp up of heat pump installations. And a large part of that will be cross training, as it were, existing heating engineers to be able to do the heat pump installs as well. And they will already have those skills, as Ellie was saying, to move across to that. But also we'll be needing to recruit a lot more new into the industry. And so that's potentially a bit more complex if they're needing to train both at once. We do also, so I know there's ERA recently, I think last week, opened their big training academy. And we've got companies like HHIC who are doing, leading the way in terms of the quality of their training as well. So we do see it coming, but it is the skills gap in terms of having the available engineers to meet demand for heat pump installations and the rate that we'll need them. That is a big area that needs support from industry and from government. So there's the training grant at the moment for, I think it's £500 to do the course, but that doesn't go far enough that in terms of offsetting the money you'd get for missing the jobs that you could do during that week. We know how busy heating engineers are at the moment, and then it doesn't offset travel costs to and from the training course. And so there is, I think, a lot more support that needs to be done in the skills market.
Fabulous. So, I think, I mean, coming to you, I know from the technical side with Fairheat there, that issue of skills, I think building on what Katrina's saying about obviously there's numbers. There's a big, as we've known with across the low carbon sector, there's a big issue of sort of numbers and the ability to bring people into the industry there as well. But I guess from your side, when you're looking at delivering and getting hybrids to work, is it enough there? But is it a bit patchwork, or how are we doing, do we think, on being able to bring people in with the skills to get this right, to deliver, as we said, to make sure we've got the systems working as we need them to?
Yeah, no, certainly. Well, to echo what Katrina said, yeah, the industry is very aware that especially there's going to be upcoming incoming regulations for heat networks as well. So the heat networks industry is very aware that there will be a sort of, well, not necessarily a skills gap, but just not enough people. And again, as Katrina was saying, with grants, specific grants for heat networks, which cover sort of a wide range of topics within that. In terms of sort of what we see, I mean, we work with some really, really great contractors on site, and there's a lot of engagement. And sort of a key thing that we've do in terms of actually optimizing heat networks and ensuring we are getting the best performing hybrid solution at the end is there is a lot of work put in sort of doing energy center witnessing, 100% acceptance testing at dwelling level, because that's where sort of heat networks really do vary from people that are very used to just an individual boiler in every house, whereas heat network, it's obviously all connected. So if one plot isn't quite working properly, it really can impact the whole network. And we probably do see a gap in that level of acceptance testing and actually validating that it's been commissioned properly, the controls are working as per sort of the design, and making sure that we are achieving those really low carbon solutions, and we're optimizing that low carbon heat source. So yeah, we definitely are seeing a bit of a gap in that, and as there is going to be that sort of acceleration into hybrid and low carbon heat sources, just the amount of people that we're going to require to join the industry is, yeah, that's going to take off really.
Does that come a bit into standards? We've got things, obviously, I believe people will be talking this in the technical workshop about MCS, that this is starting to be looked at there, but do we have standards wise, as you said? I mean, because obviously we've got things in the heat pump side on standalone techs, we have some of the standards and requirements there. Is there enough, or will that encapsulate sort of good practice when we're combining them, if that's fair to say?
In terms of optimizing sort of heat networks specifically and incoming regulations, it is still undergoing consultation, but there will be a framework and the requirement to meet certain KPIs. And that's certainly, unfortunately, the heat networks industry has a lot of badly performing heat networks. So ensuring that, well, there'll be sort of two elements to this. Any new heat networks, we're going to be wanting to make sure that they're meeting KPIs, they're being assessed, and sort of demonstrating that they're going to be well performing. And then as a second side to that, when we're looking to decarbonize existing buildings and retrofit and upgrade existing heat networks, and there'll be a whole requirement for optimization works in that as well. So yeah, definitely in the next couple of years, specifically for heat networks and how we move forward with those, incoming regulations are definitely going to help with that.
That's interesting. I know, as you said, we've got Ofgem now, and we've got kind of obviously coming the framework coming in for upholding standards. So it'll be interesting, I guess, to see how hybrids and other tech that are being to networks will be taken in on that one there. moving on, thank you all for that one there. I know we've sort of talked about mentioned, I know Katrina had mentioned about consumer and end user awareness and kind of perceptions about hybrid heat, which we've been talking about there. And actually, Ed, I'll start with you and go through the panel on this one. But I was wondering about, at the moment, if there are any sort of standout challenges, or conversely, any sort of selling points you're seeing about the case at the minute for combining different technologies and bringing in hybrids, particularly, as you said, we're linking them up with heating, with heat networks or things like that. There, I was wondering about sort of that perception side from the market, in both, I guess, from domestic users, but perhaps even commercial. Ed, just I was wondering how that's sort of factoring at the minute. And as I said, I get that mixture of challenges, or perhaps also the set that, you know, are you seeing any selling points for people in that hybrid way, if they understand perhaps hybrid in a vehicle way, even that?
Now, I think one of the issues that we have from a consumer perspective is understanding how to use heat. So we're very guilty in this country of misusing our heat, I think, as consumers. I mean, I often, as Ellie spoke about, we do a lot of work in district heating, and you know, we can go into a dwelling and they've got the thermostat turned 30 degrees, they've got all the windows open, you know, because they're too hot, but they don't want to turn the heating off. Or conversely, we're very clever, or we're really good at boosting heat instead of using sort of, say, for instance, long periods of low temperature heat and stuff like that. So I think from a consumer perspective, we have to be better at using our heat. You know, our homes need to be better insulated, but we have a responsibility as a consumer to do that. I think from energy perspective, there are hybrid systems out there. I know that Alpha, amongst others, do these sort of hybrid systems, and from a consumer perspective, they just want heat. I'm not sure there's a massive concern at the moment, as long as it doesn't cost them any more where that heat or how that heat is produced. So I think, you know, we have to be considerate of the cost of installing these systems, the cost of running the systems. I know people that have had heat pumps installed who absolutely love them. I also know people who've had heat pumps installed who don't like them. I don't know too many at the moment who've had hybrid systems installed, but obviously, you know, we do talk to people who've got them on a domestic level. And then in the verse, I think on a commercial level, people just want to be given heat. So again, back in the heat network perspective, I'm sorry to talk about it, but it's one where we do a lot more of our work. You know, we are a manufacturer of a heat interface unit, which is essentially is a combi boiler, but it's that transitional piece from the heat network into the dwelling. We have to make that as efficient as we can. We have to make that the best we can for the consumer to be able to use, but also from a cost effective perspective. Now, the issue with the HRU and heat is that if there's an issue with hot water or heat, the go-to is always it's the heat interface unit. Whereas I know we touched on it before, but you know, the network it connects to, there's a lot that has to be done there, which is again is down to the skills, it's down to the design of the system. So, you know, so to go off tangent a bit, but yeah, I think, you know, it's just about doing that piece of understanding how we use heat, how the heat is produced. I think on a bigger scale, so we're talking about district heating or communal heating, it's irrelevant. They just want to be given heat. But from a domestic level, you know, people just want the best. You know, I'm not. There is a huge drive, I think, towards getting net zero and to be as carbon efficient as we can. But I think people are still driven by cost at the moment. You know, ultimately, there's been a cost of living crisis. There still is a cost of living crisis. Is someone going to rip out a well-performing combi boiler and stick in a heat pump system, which is going to, or a hybrid system, which could cost them twice the amount and not necessarily being cheaper to run? I don't know. The technology is there. I just think there's a lot of work to be done on policy and on people's understanding on how systems work.
That's excellent. I think that leads us in quite nicely. Ed, I was actually, I mean, there's a lot more to asking this, and as always, we're making sure to our audience as well, there'll be time for out. Please do, if there's any questions on any of the issues raised, please do keep those sort of coming and into us as we put them to our panel there. I was coming up as we come to the end of the session there. I wanted to going to do the give you a bit of prep time, but do the nice roundup question that always gives us nice copy as well, and I think probably gives us things to think about where we're going. But obviously, election wise and beyond that, regardless of where we're at, politically in the next few years. I was wondering if I could just get a few views on where we think hybrids will or perhaps should be fitting in most effectively to that wider decarbonisation side, and if they there was anything, if there's one point or one priority, whether it be policy or training, that the panel would like to see or think will be can make hybrid an important part of that there. So if I'm going to start, I did earlier, so Katrina, if it's all right to bring you in, and I'll go to Ellie and finish off with Ed on those there. But that sense of, I guess the priority of what hybrids can mean, and perhaps what you think would be a good or a logical priority for making sure it fits well into that net zero, if there is a role there.
Yeah, definitely. So a few weeks ago, we launched our big Innovating to Net Zero modelling report, which was modelling how we can get the UK energy system to net zero by 2050. And so we run, I think, about 3,000 different scenarios. And if you forced the models to exclude hybrid heat pumps, you ended up increasing the cost of decarbonising the energy system by £200 billion. Which was quite a surprise to us internally as well. And the reason why that is that hybrid heat pumps have a real potential to avoid restricting the rollout of electrification of heat and electrification of transport, because we know that there are some currently and upcoming big constraints on the capacity of the electricity grid. And the role that we see hybrid heat pumps is that transitional role. And it's not, the hybrids in our modelling weren't there so that the gas boiler component could kick in when it got cold. It was still modelling that the heat pumps would do all of that heavy lifting. The hybrids were there so that when the electricity grid was under constraint, then the gas boilers could be that kind of flexible capacity. So then you could still roll out enough heat pumps that we need at the scale and the pace. So it's not stifling that. And then as that smooths out in the future, then we'd see that transitioning to net zero compatible heating systems. So that is the way that we would see hybrid heat pumps playing out.
Brilliant. I think that's it's interesting. It brings it quite nicely back round to talking about transition and perception there. But I think, as you said as well, that it's it's like complementing the heat pump side rather than perhaps the sort of dangers of it could be a greenwashing side of, well, you're just
there's that as well. And what the interesting part is so the modelling showed that this significant cost to the energy system if you exclude hybrid heat pumps. That doesn't mean necessarily that we should do it. There's many alternate other aspects, so the consumer proposition, the cost of it, the policy, the awareness, but it's an interesting discussion to have.
Brilliant, thank you, Katrina. And it always opens these things up more, sometimes more than it gives nice conclusions. But that's useful for us, I think. Ellie, if I could come to you. I mean, obviously, in terms of where you're working directly with it, there, that view of what hybrid might lead us, or perhaps where you think it can be.
Just to echo Katrina in that, even though we are moving away from gas, it's certainly going to play a very big part. While we just don't have the electrical grid capacity. So in terms of especially existing buildings, as I already sort of touched on, they can't all be electric tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. So we're able to achieve some of that decarbonisation with hybrid, but then still relying on that gas connections as well. But sort of thinking longer term, and especially on much larger district heating schemes, other low carbon heat sources that aren't just heat pumps, but waste heat connections, data centres, wastewater treatment is definitely probably something that's can be explored a lot more. I mean, there are a lot of industries that produce waste heat. On a communal heat network, it's probably not as viable just because of the capex involved in harnessing that heat, but certainly as we're moving towards large scale district heating, that's definitely something that will probably become much more viable long term. And then just in terms of actually seeing hybrid solutions optimized, as I said, just actually getting operational data, making sure energy centers are properly metered and there's proper understanding of controls, and then just that kind of skills gap that goes at all levels, designers, sort of commissioning engineers, maintenance is a really key one in heat networks as well. So all of that really will really come into play in sort of moving the industry forward, again, from a district heating view on it.
But it's having that, I guess, that application, I guess, as you said, Dan, it's, and Katrina was saying, it might not always be, hybrids, like everything, isn't it? It's not a blanket solution here. It's about options for the application you're looking at, or that, what your local heat sources are, or perhaps some of the challenges in that sense.
And especially, I'm sorry.
No, you carry on.
No, just on larger scale as well. It might not just be one low carbon heat source. There might be a few, and then you sort of reduce that boiler top up as well. So, yeah, there's definitely, and having that centralized energy center already sort of sets you up to make those changes much more easily than sort of potentially individual as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. And Ed, to finish off, and thank you all. I know of all these things, there's about a million more questions that come to mind just as we try and tap this off there. But from yourselves at Altecnic there, like what do we think about what would you like to see going forward next year that you think would be best use of hybrids, or where we might start to fit them in a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a place. I mean, I certainly can't add any more to what the two expert panelists have already said about what's currently out there and where the market is moving forward. I think, so there is a place for it. I just think moving forward, when we are making policies, is that the government involve industry leaders and people who actually understand the technologies that we've got, the drive to net zero, and not just give a policy that we've then all got to try and achieve, which may not be achievable. But we've got so many clever people within our industry, whether it be manufacturing designers, whether it be system designers, anything like that. We should pull on that knowledge base, I think, to be able to help to drive relative policies, or certainly policies that are going to be achievable, to allow us to get to where we need to get to, incorporating all of the different technologies. We've spent a lot of time focusing on heat pump hybrid systems, but I think, as Ellie said, there are so many other systems out there where we use waste for energy, like we said, sort of data centers where heat is a byproduct of something else. Don't just put it in the atmosphere, let's capture it, let's use it, let's do it as best we can. And we are getting there. There's some really clever technologies and some really great systems that run off those sort of byproducts of heat, but I think it just needs to be a bit more of a consideration as well. So, yes, the focus is on the heat pumps, because I think the government have put that focus on heat pumps, but there are other technologies, and I think other systems out there which we can achieve it with as well.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you all once again for putting up with the questions, but for really helping, I think, give a good sort of round context of what that is and the opportunities. But of course, with a lot of different technologies, they're accepting that being the pragmatic sort of challenges of using them there. And so I'd like once again to thank our panel there. So we've got Katrina Young and from Energy Systems Catapult, Ellie Hiscock with Fairheat, and Ed Morris at Altecnic. And thank you guys for the time and the questions on that one. For the next part of our webinar now, we're going to be handing over to Ed, who you may already recognise today, but for a presentation looking a bit more, I think, at the company's own view on sort of innovation and controls in and getting the most out of the hybrid there. So Ed, I'm going to move over to you, if that's all right.
Okay, yeah, no problem at all. Hopefully you can see my slides. I don't know if you can or not.
Yes, we've got the slides coming in, Ed. I think we can see those there.
The full screen shortly. Have you got them full screen?
Not yet. This is always the challenge. I drop this on you, Ed, and then it's like
No. Please don't worry. Please, I'm just trying to find out where the call's gone. So on my side, so let's stop share again. Bear with me.
no worries at all.
What's it got like on your screen? How can you see them? Is it just minimised or?
Yeah, we've got it minutes, so we can see it all there, and it's just on the side. You've got so it is more or less probably the view you've got of the PowerPoint in that sense.
I'm just trying to get so it goes full screen. For some reason it's gone on me. Bear with me for a second. Right, let's stop sharing and we'll try again.
Let's
Right.
see.
So you're back to me again now, are you?
That's right. We've got them there. Coming in, and actually, Ed, while we're getting this set up, I know there's some questions from the audience about slides and availability for the panel, but we'll be able to, I think, with the team, be able to sort that out if that's all right as well. There's some questions about the availability of some of the slides as well.
For some reason it's saying I'm sharing it, but I can't see where it's been shared, so bear with me for a second. Technologies.
Otherwise, Ed, we should be able to share them from this side if that helps, and then
You've got them, yeah. For some reason,
Abby and the clever technical team here will be able to make it all look seamless, and that will be.
I'll be like Chris. We should just say next slide, please. That'll be the.
No, that's good. That always, I think that gives a good sense of looking.
Realism, I suppose, if nothing else, isn't it? It shows.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's this all
is
this so far.
I'll just try one more time. Bear with me.
Brilliant, thanks.
Right, let's try one more time. See if it'll work. Any joy?
Okay, we're up, so we can see. Otherwise, we'll do one last try on this, Ed. Otherwise, I think if it's all right, I think we can see how we're doing. So yeah, we'll just push on through the slides if that's all right, Ed, just so we're not making sure we got the most of your time.
Okay, as we are. Okay, that's fine. I'll put on the slides. So
Thanks, Ed.
we're going to just go through a few things now. I should give you a little bit of a background around Altecnic as a business. So we are part of the wider Caleffi Group, which is still a third generation owned family company over in Italy. We're based in Milan, just north of Milan by the lakes. I've worked in worse places, I shan't lie. As a group, we turn over just over 500 million euros. UK, we're about 60 million pounds. Got just over 100 employees based here in the UK. We're based up in Stafford by junction 14 of the M6. We carry a raft of ISO accreditation, which is fantastic to produce from an auditing perspective. We have to go through quite a few audits, which is always challenging, but shows our commitment, I think, to showing what we can give to the industry. We class ourselves as what we class as a total solutions provider. What we mean by that is we like to think that anything in a hydraulic system, that we have an offering for that. We are currently in our own 7,500 square metre head office and warehousing, but we're just about to move towards the end of the year to 18,500 square metre head office and warehouse, training facilities, all that sort of stuff. So we're quite excited about offering that moving forward into the future. And we are deeming ourselves to be the leading manufacturer and supplier of hydraulic solutions. That's both plumbing and heating industry, so both domestic and commercially. A little bit about us as an organisation. So Caleffi, we keep everything in-house as much as we can. So when we take a valve, we take it kind of from its infancy all the way through to it meeting the marketplace. And that starts off with our brass stamping factory, which is a plant called Presco, which is based all of our plants within about a square mile of each other, so we can keep everything nice and easy. So we stamp all our own brass. We always use raw brass, so new raw brass that we bring in. That's done in our hot forging plant. We stamp about.
Sorry, just while you're going on, is there just if I think we're managing the slides from this side. This will be the last one, everyone on there. So, but is there a slide we should be on, and just let us know as we're going through?
Yeah. I've got the one that says the Presco plant at the moment. I don't know what everybody else can see, but that's where I am.
Yeah, so is that, if we put that on, I think is that the third or fourth slide?
Third slide, that is.
Third slide, brilliant. We'll move on to that one as well. Thanks.
Yeah. So we forge about just over 1,200 tons of brass per year from there, and anything normally about 150 tons of that is classed as low lead brass as well. So we are sort of doing that carbon embedding and the drive towards using better materials. On the next slide, I'm not sure if I flick through or you flick through, we now talk to our machine and transfer assembly lines, which is where we've got a picture of our head office with the red building, which is our Cuba Rosso.
Sorry, I think it might be you flicking through actually. If that's, would you be able to put it on 4? Sorry about this one. That's on me there. I've confused. Yeah, I think that's the one, Ed. I think you are in control after all that. So we're getting there.
I'll stand back. I'll carry on. So yeah, so our head office is in Fontanetto. That's where we have a lot of our warehouse and assembly. Our Cuba Rosso, which is the red building there, where we do a lot of our research and development. We have a lot of transfer machines in there. Most of those are industry 4 that's where we talk about technologies, where we talk about connectivity, collecting live data, etc. from the systems. All that is done at our plant head office in Fontanetto. And also we've got our plastic moulding factory, which is a place called Catapult. Again, all these within a square mile of each other. So we can take anything from the brass stamping, from the plastics of the valve, and we then put them together in our assembly plant. So there's a lot going on as a manufacturer. We produce a lot of brass, a lot of valves come out of our factory in Italy. Some of the products that we have, so things like thermostatic mixing valves, radiator valves, ball valves, TMVs, thermostatic valves, all those products we have within our product lines. We have also a range of domestic products, so we're moving into the domestic world as well. So we like to think that we can offer you a complete solution when it comes to our product offerings as we move forward. So we've been talking about hybrid systems in the first part of the webinar. So I know we're going to talk some of the more technical stuff in the second part. But we talk a lot about hybrid systems and different types. And we said previously there's a lot of focus on hybrid heat pump systems. But it hasn't just got to be a heat pump system. There are different ways that we can do it. But there are numerous different types of systems that we can look at adding hybrid connections to. So things like heat pumps, so heat pump with a boiler, with a gas connected boiler, solar thermal backup systems, not so much pop in the UK, but certainly across Europe. We use a lot of solar thermal. Wood or biomass with a backup system. So, we burn in pellets, and then there's been a lot of talk about the emissions that the biomass boilers give off. But again, some of the technologies we have now are really efficient. Geothermal, so we're using what is around us to produce the heat. We're taking that free source of heat, whether it be from the air or whether it be from the ground. We can start to use what's around us. Also, hydronic heat pump with a furnace or boiler. So we'll talk about, a wet heat pump system, but also using a different kind of boiler to top it up. So as we spoke about before, there are evident limitations around all the technologies that we use, not just heat pumps, not just boilers, whether it be cars or anything we see around us, there's limitations. We have to understand what those limitations are and work with those limitations to give us, a better offering. So those are some of the different systems that we have. Some considerations to make, when we're using heat pump systems or hybrid systems or different sorts of heat source. Now, there are considerations to be taken. We're generating heat. We need to use that heat as efficiently as we can. Things like thermostatic radiator valves or TRVs, there's certainly been different ways, though. Technology has moved on even within things like radiator valves. Traditionally, we've used a manual valve, so we use a thermostatic radiator valve and what we class as a lock shield valve to balance the system. But technology's moved on now. We've now got dynamic valves, which means that we can control the flow independent through radiators. So when we are producing heat, if it be a lower temperature where we need to be more considerate about how we use the heat, we can control it a lot better with things like thermostatic radiator valves. Dirt and air separation within systems. We want the systems to be as efficient as we can. So with things like dirt and air separators, we want to remove the air as much as we can, right the way down to microbubble level. We want to take the debris out of the system to the smallest molecules, the smallest particles if we can. So we use fine mesh filters. Things like protection, so if we are using things like heat pumps, using things like antifreeze valves, there's 2 ways we can use glycol, which can be quite a messy and dirty way of doing things, or we can use what we class as a freshwater system with an antifreeze valve. It's just a safety device. It prevents the system from being damaged should there be freezing. Fill and flush valves, we need to be able to get the chemicals if we are using chemicals into the system, or we want to carry out a flush. So you have to incorporate this into the design. So a fill and flush valve allows us to drain the system down, refill it, flush it, whatever you need to do. All those considerations are there to be made. And things like expansion vessels or expansion tanks, whichever way you want to call them, all these have got a part to play in the systems, in the hybrid systems, in the heat pump systems, to make sure that we're working and controlling them as efficiently as possible. So we want a bit of BIM now, and something that we were talking about. For people who don't know what BIM is, it's essentially a collection of parts that designers or consultants can draw upon and use them in a system design, so everything becomes connected. So within a BIM model, you'll have a physical model of the product, but you also have the driving data which sits behind there. So performance data, dimensional data, all that sort of stuff sits around BIM. So when you are designing systems, and you want everything to talk together, if you're using BIM as your source, you can drag your different components from there and use them. And Cleffy have their own BIM collection, which is called bim.cleffy.com, if you want to visit the website. And that covers an extensive range of all of our products. If you're a designer or you're a consultant and you want to use a product and you want to drag all that data into your modeling systems for your buildings, then Cleffy have that available, whether it be for 3D models, etc. All that is available via the cleffy.bim. It also got some intuitive interface, simplifies the process of browsing, so you can select by part code, or you can select by model type, or by product selection. You may not, you know you need a valve, but you don't know exactly which one you want. So we've got this sort of selection process now, which helps you to do it. We've got, the objects accurately represent Cleffy's extensive range. We do have a large range of products, as we've spoken about before. We've got a thing called schemes as well, which provides standardization of systems. So it's like you can download a predefined or pre-designed scheme, should we say, which contains components which you can look at and draw off and take some information from there. And the platform offers a seamless capability with leading BIM software, allowing smooth integration with existing workflows. We work with different sort of platforms on BIM as well to be able to do that. But it helps to take errors out of design, all that sort of stuff. So it's just a little bit of information that we've got there with regarding the BIM store. BIM schemes, something we spoke about before, they are standardized schemes. So you can look at the system you've got, whether it be a gas-fired, heat pump, hybrid, whatever it may be. These systems are already designed for you. So you can go in there, you can drag them out, you can see all the componentry which is involved in there, the different kinds of pipework layouts, whatever it may be, all that is involved within the scheme side of the BIM store as well. So take a little bit of the workload up. I'm not saying the scheme will be designed exactly how you want it, but it will be a starting source for you to start to look at the systems and what you may need. So with examples, let's say we have a look at heat pump systems, you can see how they look. They are designed in 3D, so you can rotate the models, you can spin around them, you can zoom in, you can click on individual components, which will give you all the information that you may require for it to be on your system. So, we've got plenty of examples of what they be. So heat pump systems, hybrid systems, something very valid for the conversations that we're having today. So you can see there we've got different types of systems with hybrids, incorporate hybrid technology, should we say, incorporated in there. So that's just a little bit of an overview. I know we sort of pushed for a little bit of time with the technical issues that we had moving through. But hopefully it's given you a little bit of an insight into Altecnic and Cleffy as a wider organisation, as a business, but also from not just as a valve manufacturer, but some of the software and some of the other stuff that we have to offer as an organisation. So if you are designing or specifying buildings, hopefully we can assist on that project for you and work with you all the way through to construction and installation stage. So that is me done on the presentation, Neil. Hopefully we're back on time a little bit. I'll try to get through this.
Brilliant. You pulled that in perfectly on that one, Aaron. I'm using the word seamless and hoping you'll all give me the credit on that one. But that was quite interesting. I know we're going into the technical discussion now. We've got a few questions from the audience coming in as well. I mean, I guess building on what you're talking about there, but in terms of some of the innovations and from your side, BIM, and we've mentioned controls in the first part of the session, but it does seem, is BIM in that sense, without oversimplifying it, about, as you said, bringing it together, partly bringing it together, that understanding of how these different systems are going to work. I was wondering in terms of, has that been the main innovation, I guess, from Altecnic side that you see when you're looking at supporting hybrid and I guess broader system efficiency as well in that sense of what's going on?
System design in general, you've got the capability there to be able to bring 3D models into your larger scale. So the building design that you've got, you can drag and drop some of the products in, you can download. You've then got all the information, whether it's performance criteria, installation requirements, all that sort of stuff is all in one platform, in one design system. And it just makes it easier for design. I know a lot of people that use it. I still know a lot of people that don't use it. But I think as an organisation, as Cleffy, we have to have that source of information for us to be able to work with engineers, consultants, designers, whatever it may be, to be able to be part of those projects. So like I say, it's just another side, but a very important side of our business. There's a whole team of people over in Italy and who work on this day in, day out. It's not just when someone picks up and puts down. We have a whole sort of connected team that work on things like bin content and stuff like that. So it's something we take seriously and put a lot of investment into as well.
Fabulous. Thank you. And I think that brings us, and we're moving into the last panel today. What we're going to do is a bit more of a technical workshop. And so we were going to bring yourself in, and I'm also say we're pleased to be joined by Steve Sutton, technical manager from the Heating and Hot Water Industry Council as well. Morning, Steve. Thanks for joining us as well on that one there. There's a few technical questions I was going to dig into that we've got from the audience there, but I thought if it was all right with you both, I'd start with a traditionally broad but hopefully open-ended question, really. Just looking, I think, building on obviously what we're talking about, Ed, there with BIM, but when we look at particularly at how hybrid systems can work effectively and at best there, I was wondering what the main differences are when we're thinking about design, maintenance, specification, on optimizing them as opposed to installing and maintaining a standalone system. And is it significantly different, or are there key considerations that you think do stand out from a hybrid side? So I've brought you in, Steve. I might start, if I may, with you on that one there, just to get you in for the morning. But
yeah, morning all. Yes, we've been supporting hybrid systems at HHIC for domestic installations for quite some time, and been lobbying government to try and include it in the boiler upgrade scheme. So it's been something we think needs to be included. From the questions you're asking there, I would think that you still need to carry out low temperature heat design calculations to ensure that you know what the heat load is, and then, as always, discussing with the consumer exactly what it is that they want as well. It's out of their heating systems. I think that's quite important, and sometimes gets missed. But you've got to find the expert and then ask the questions as a consumer to get the right advice. We know that radiator sizing is always important with heat pumps and insulation as well. So with the hybrid system, you can fit it and then add your insulation levels afterwards if you wanted to, or invest in the system more afterwards. You get the benefit with quite a lot of the hybrid systems with him being able to use a smaller heat pump that's got lower electrical demand, for example, smaller footprint for positioning. Some of these you're able to fit to the wall, for example, as well. And so there's a lot of options with the hybrid, and then of course you can use the boiler for hot water rather than having to have a stored hot water system. Cuts out some of the complications, some of the installation requirements, etc., etc. So a lot of benefits to it. We've also discussed with our members, because you imagine that the members of HHIC, we have all of the boiler manufacturers, I think, in the UK as members now, but the majority of them make a heat pump, and the majority of them supply a hybrid system, which is the boiler, heat pump, and a control. And then you've also got the option to put a heat pump and control system onto an already installed boiler, which may be a possibility. So all these things gives you more offerings for the consumer. So it's different. You may get different solutions to different applications. More awkward applications may be more suitable for the hybrid. We haven't talked a lot about off-grid today as well, where hybrids may be a good potential solution. You can stick the hybrid system in, use less oil or less gas, and be using the heat pump to do the bulk of the load for the heating system. So there's a lot of potential for it. We know in Europe that they've taken hybrids on, supporting hybrids in a good way. Italy, for example, have got a really supportive financial system for hybrids. Germany, look as though they're going down the same route as well at the moment. So it's very interesting to see where all this ends. Even today, we can see that governments are starting to, departments are starting to think that they may need to start looking at how they open the pathway for hybrids.
It's quite an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, we've talked about, I think one of the themes seems to be a bit about, adding weapons to the arsenal in a sense, and actually that combination for certain applications, this might have quite a useful one. I mean, bringing that point over to yourself there, Ed, and I think this probably ties in a bit to what you were discussing, but I think, that starting off with that idea of differences in regards to design and maintenance, how does that factor in when from a company like Altecnic side? What has that meant, or is it really about some of these good practice you already see, in a heating system, whether it's a heat pump, whether it's a boiler of some form, different sources, or is it back to that controls for you that you see as the?
Yeah, I've made some notes, and I think Steve has covered off most of those with what he said with heat response. But ultimately, it's down to controls, but it's also down to the technologies working together efficiently and working out, what needs to be working at what point, which again is down to controls. From our perspective as a hydronics manufacturer, as I stated before, you give us water, we'll control where it needs to go. We'll get it to the right place at the right time, at the right temperature, all that sort of stuff. We can do that with our products. But some of the notes I made with consumers, design, cost, building design, controls, again, all that sort of stuff. And I think all this has to be incorporated. I think one of the really important things, and when I've sat in panels before when we talk about heat pumps, standalone heat pumps, should we say, is that we have to understand that there's not always a one-size-fits-all solution for everything. What is good for one system may not be efficient or good for another. And I think there's been a huge amount of talk around heat pumps. The government have driven that talk. They've sort of driven us down that road of, the heat pumps are the future. And I'm not saying that they're not, but we've also got some of the, as we've said before, some of the really clever technologies. One of these being a hybrid system where we can incorporate different types. We talk about solar thermal. We don't use it too much over here because we don't tend to have the climate to use solar thermal. But there's multiple different ways that we can generate heat. Some of it completely free, some of it obviously there's going to be a small cost to. And Steve touched on things like off-grid. We've done some really successful projects working with associations where they've got developments. Hereford being one where we've done a development where there was completely off-grid. We used a ground source heat pump or a borehole heat pump, brought into a smaller heat pump within a dwelling, which provided the heating. We then used that with a top up for the hot water. We used the heat interface unit as the sort of wall hung module for the consumer, and it was really, really successful. And that that's hybrid heating because we're using different sources. There was no gas connection there, so we had to use sort of what we had, a little bit of electricity, some of what the earth was giving us, should we say. So I think we are ready for it. We have to just move away from there isn't a one size solution fits all. We have to, everything's got to be taken on a case by case basis, and making sure that the building fabric is right for it. We've got a huge stock of buildings and houses in this country that wouldn't work at the moment for some of these different sort of heating systems. So I think I touched on it in the previous panel discussion, is we as end users and consumers have to be better in how we use our heat and become less wasteful.
Yeah, I think one of the things on the controls, Neil, that we can do is to introduce a standard that sets some minimum requirements for the controls for the hybrids, to stop people from just using the gas boiler, for example, all the time, which is really what could happen if you're not careful. But I think if we set some in a standard, the parameters, the minimum parameters that should be set in the controls. So if you just run it day to day, this is what it would do, and then the consumer or the engineer goes in and tunes that to what exactly is best for that installation. But having some basic minimum settings for the controls that the consumer can't get to, so would be probably a good starting point, I would think. Another thing. Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, because obviously regulation's a big part in all of this there, but would that be really, a specific standard for hybrids in that sense to make sure that it's using that, or would that be as controlled? Would that apply uniformly to controls, that standard in getting the best sort of model, the best performance out of that system?
Well, it's really, that's a difficult question to answer because
put you on the spot with that one there. But
we've got a hybrids paper that we wrote, and we gave some recommendations in those, Neil, of where we think it could be, legislation could be introduced, and standardisation could cover this. I can't remember exactly which standards we picked out now, but you can imagine that we're a big supporter of national standards from BSI. We would like to see an installation standard for heat pumps and hybrids with BSI. We think that would be a good starting point, because you can then reference all building regulations, engineers training, etc., to a national standard for installation of heat pumps and hybrids. And it's one of the things that's on our agenda of lobbying government at the moment to see whether we can get this introduced.
I'm going to build on that, actually, because we've had a question in from the audience, and loosely linked to that, I think, for Steve and Ed, but I think this sums up sort of the need for information there. But someone was asking about where they might begin to find information for training on integrating, even if it was a hybrid in that traditional sense of gas and heat pumps. And they were asking, especially with regards to controls, but also things like direct hot water, storage, Legionella. I think it's that the complications of a system. Is that where can they begin to find that information? Is that from an industry side, or is there the beginnings of that there, Steve, or is this partly what we're talking about for where they're
from we always recommend, well, when you're at shows, exhibitions, Neil, you tend to get the younger apprentices and people walk up to you and ask these sort of questions, and we always say to them, look on our website, choose one of the manufacturers or a couple of the manufacturers, get in contact with them, ask them about their training courses, go and learn about the products. They'll tell you a lot about the legislation and requirements. The training courses are very in-depth, very good, and it's a good basis to get product knowledge and installation knowledge and that type of thing. Having a look at something like the subsidy design guide is another area that we'd recommend to people. So to gain improve people's knowledge really of especially in the hybrid area where you want to hook things up together, the manufacturer's a good place to start.
Yeah, and the subsidy design guide you said is really interesting one as well. I mean, Ed, from your side, I mean, is there training there that you're offering with these systems in a sense? What is that responsibility from the industry side?
I have to echo what Steve says, really. I think there are some really good courses that manufacturers now put on, which will help you understand their technologies and how their technology works, because at this present moment in time, with things like hybrid, I don't think that for instance, industry standards or a sort of generic training system would necessarily work, because everybody's technologies are slightly different. The way that some gas boilers will work with heat pumps, etc., may be slightly different to others. So for us, manufacturers, would always be a recommendation, and we offer training on valves and stuff like that, and some form of system design. But when it comes to things like heat pumps and the heat sources, then the manufacturer, I think, is always the best place to go, because you can understand how their system works, how it can be incorporated, some of the sort of tweaks and the do's and the don'ts to do with that technology, and you'll understand it. And as you build yourself up, you can go onto these different manufacturers' course, and you've got an understanding from across the board then, as opposed to a generic one. But yeah, I think manufacturers is always the best start. Things like Legionella good practices is going to be the same whatever system you've got, whether it's low temperature, hot water, high temperature, whether it's a hospital system or anything. Legionella is Legionella. Legionella control is Legionella control. So you should always take heed of that. Water temperatures, dead legs, velocity of flow through pipe work, all that sort of stuff should always be taken into consideration. So that will never change, because Legionella is not going to change because it's a heat pump. It's not more clever, but it isn't that clever. It just wants somewhere to be able to grow, breed, and multiply. So yeah, from a Legionella perspective, stick to what you know, stick to what's already in the industry and the good practices. But yeah, manufacturer, I think, are always a good source. They know their products better than anybody else.
Yeah, if you go, sorry Neil, if you go onto our
No,
website, we've got you can go onto there and you can find the links to our members and their training sites. So it's something that we try to help and point people in the direction of. You've got all the different manufacturers that we represent, and the links to their training provision is on there.
Brilliant, thank you guys. I mean, I was going to, I mean, I guess that was an interesting point there, I think, about, and building on your point, Ed, about perhaps me oversimplifying about the idea of a single standard there. But I mean, I think from a technical side there, you know, is there a case of needing to be prescriptive about what hybrids are, or is that actually counterintuitive, really, in a sense? As you say, is this about, you know, even whether it's a heat pump and something, you know, we often talk about hybrids in those terms, but actually is that unhelpful when actually, you know, broader sense, is that realistic? You know,
I don't think it's unhelpful. I think what we have to be very careful of, and what we're very good at doing in multiple industries in this country, is we overcomplicate things. You know, we put all this information around stuff, which I think can lead to a bit of confusion. I mean, ultimately, when it comes to, say, for instance, a hybrid system, there's going to probably be two people in the whole process that need to understand it: the person who's designing it and the person that's installing it. As long as I understand how a hybrid system works, everybody else in the chain becomes irrelevant, because the end user is getting heat, whether it's produced via, you know, whether it's produced by a gas fire or a heat pump or a hybrid system. So they're taken out of the equation. But somebody's designed a system to work efficiently with the controls, with the technology, and then the person itself needs to understand that to make sure that design is incorporated into the installation. And then, you know, we're happy. So no, we just got to be careful we don't overcomplicate, but put enough information out there for it to work viably.
That's great. I mean, actually, a question we've got in, just to throw a bit of a challenge on that point, but someone's asked about, you know, heat pumps and hybrids, and, you know, the element of, you know, are they seen as niche there? They've raised that it seems to be kind of individual training courses, when, you know, is there actually, does this fit in? I think the theme we've had today about is an element of mandating sort of low temperature, a qualification of low temperature, or a broader sense that would help, and hybrids can fit into that a little bit in terms of, you know, where they might be best used, or what should be happening.
Yeah, I mean, hybrids, I don't think they're a niche, because I think these technologies have been around for years. People think heat pump technology is new. It's not. It's been around for years and years and years. Hybrid systems are the same. I think if there are, so we say, chargeable courses, people can make them sound niche, so they're driving the demand. But ultimately, we just need to understand, you know, every hybrid system will work differently. Same as every gas install works differently, every heat pump system works differently. But if we understand the general ethos of what we're trying to achieve, then, you know, that training can be generic, because we're understanding how a hybrid system works, how we can use different technologies to produce heat. But then where the more intrinsic training comes around is when we talk about individual technologies. So then we talk about manufacturers, we talk about control systems. So, you know, they're not niche, because a hybrid system will be a hybrid system. We just have to make sure that whatever the message we give out is consistent, I think, because if one course is offering one thing and one course offering thing, because there's no standard around it, that's when I think it can become confusing. While it's unregulated, it always becomes a bit of a wild west. But as soon as it becomes regulation around things, it makes things a bit more conformed across the board.
Thanks, Steve. And to, I guess, building on to that, you know, Steve, in that sense, is, you know, how have we seen, you know, that idea about this niche? I mean, as you said, these technologies have been around for a long time. You know, the understanding, the basic knowledge there, but where do we need to go, you know, when we're coming up, an election side coming up, and what we might see policy wise? I was going to bring you in on that one a little bit, Steve, from your side of what can we do to help, I guess, broader industry understanding, or getting the effective use of this, so we're using hybrids in the best way, or we're using them perhaps in the most effective applications, regardless of what that actually is. I think it comes down to that prescriptive side there.
Yeah, I think that we always talk at HHIC about allowing consumer choice. So I think part of this comes to consumer choice. What does the consumer want? And and how much has the consumer got to spend is another big point to make as well. You know, if it's even with the grant, a heat pump install can be quite expensive. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. So we need to create as many pathways as possible to decarbonisation, multi-technology approach. We always say this at HHIC, it's not, you know, one. We tend to be looking to back one horse at the moment with heat pumps through the government. That's where all the financial support is, etc., etc. And maybe they're going to come unstuck with that, because at the moment I don't think heat pump sales are anywhere near the 600,000 they want. We've seen heat pump sales in Europe soon to be stalling as well at the same time. So we need to make as many routes as possible. I always have this thing, Neil, when I don't know if you have this problem when you go into a car park and whoever's designed it never seems to have put in enough entrances or exits. So I always think this is the same principle. We need to have as many options as possible to reach this decarbonisation target. And there may be some stepping stones that we need to put in there. And I think hybrids is one of them. And we've got the technology, we've got the products. So, you know, let's give the consumers some choice in there as well. It seems to be quite a simple solution when you look at it like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, part of this discussion is about the potential there, and I wanted to also look on the other side about perhaps some of the limitations of a hybrid compared to a standalone in terms of how they can be used effectively, particularly with planning and sizing. Again, this might come back a bit to that being prescriptive about how they're used rather than giving the choices. But I was wondering, and you know, Ed, I might come to you on a start, because I know you've mentioned a lot of work from the district heating side there. Is it in a way, are there certain areas where they can be perhaps more easier wins than other areas at the minute? And is that something that might change or could potentially change, whether that's policy or whether that comes from standards or something like that?
Yeah, policy's got to be right, and the standards have got to be right as well, you know. And the issue that we have is that because there's a multitude of different building types and different systems, is that again there is no one size solution fits all, but we need some form of standardisation around everything and policy around everything to make sure that what we're doing is right, essentially, and remove that Wild West sort of scenario that we can sometimes find when it comes to, you know, district heating. Again, has been used across the world for tens and tens, if not hundreds of years, in different formats. And you know, district heating, I think, is a great way for us to drive towards, you know, net zero and reducing carbon reductions, because the heat sources we can control, you know, so much better. You've got one single heat source or two. We're looking at a hybrid system. We can control the exhaust gases, we control the emissions, we can control the efficiency. So there's just lots of different options, I think, at the moment. But policy and sort of standards need to drive that as well, and drive the development moving forward.
Excellent. I mean, that's an interesting point. With you said that Wild West there. I guess that tension always of, you know, the Wild West, but also you want to have that choice and you want to have a reactive, you know, industry.
Accountability at the moment, unfortunately, in district heating, there's not a lot of accountability. So if you design a system that then does it really efficiently, there's not really accountability of who's responsible for that. Now, it's going to change with things like Ofgem and stuff coming in. But I'm sure, like, you know, some of the people like Ellie will know more than me. But you know, it's making people accountable for what's been designed, what's been installed, and then more importantly, what's running. Once it's up and running, who takes control and accountability of what's going on? Because there's no accountability, it is a Wild West, because nobody cares. They just keep passing the buck on to somebody else.
I think that'll be, as you said, from the district heating side, that's an interesting one, obviously, because, you know, we'll be seeing Ofgem and that they're now putting that structure in that we hope will, you know, how performance is sort of measured there. I mean, Steve, coming to you a bit on that idea of limitations there, but also, I guess, looking at you know, things like hydrogen, biofuels, you know, different types of electric systems as well. You know, I guess I was curious what perhaps the best ways are. I guess that idea of pragmatism and being able to, you know, are there areas where at the minute where perhaps this might be less interesting, or even areas where hybrids you think, oh, that fits, or that could be something really useful for a specific type of applications? Or am I probably simplifying a more complex issue about limitations and how we're best using or ensure that we're prioritizing use in the right places?
I think when we look at, say, new build, for example, that we can see that they're going down the heat pump route, stored out water, etc. I do think that then you've got to think, well, when you've got no stored out water, do electric showers come into this? But then they've got a big electrical demand, so that can be a problem. But there may be some room in smaller properties for a heat pump combined with direct electrical heat, hot water, so electrical showers, etc. But you do have to remember that, you know, the showers pull in quite a lot of kilowatts. You know, 9-10 kilowatts is quite a lot. But even though it's only doing it for 4 minutes, so there may be some room in there. Government at the moment are consulting on smart consultation, design, side response, cyber security, all these sort of things to make products more connectable, give consumers access to smarter tariffs. So we need to get all that in place as well, I think, to give the consumer more choice as well. I think the complexity around this, Neil, will be that if we make the controls too complicated and the consumer can't use them when we get into this, that may be a problem as well. So let's get all these things in place. Let's make it as simple as possible. Let's get people being able to access these smart tariffs. I think it's the same as we're doing with gas at the moment as well. You know, we're trying to make gas more available by widening WABI ranges, added hydrogen to it as well. You know, that's maybe something that we need to do in the short term to decarbonise gas a little bit as well, because as some of the speakers have said on the call today, I don't think gas is going to go away as quick as people want it to. There's still ongoing work with hydrogen, although it looks to have stuttered a little bit, but there's still potential there. We've got the technology. We have boilers that work on that, on hydrogen quite easily. They can be installed as natural gas and converted. But that's, you know, we're sort of miles away from that as a solution at the moment. So pushing hybrids and heat pumps seems to be, you know, a good solution at the moment as an interim, you know, till we get to everything that we can offer in.
Excellent. I think that's it's interesting to come back to the controls. I mean, I know I'm going to do the traditional roundup where, again, we've talked about some of the complexities of this, and I get you to try and simplify it and give me nice, easy answers that I can understand from my media brain there. But I think before that, I mean, Ed's coming, building on what Steve was saying now about controls and simplification. I'm not going to throw it on you guys and say, how do we put that there? But there was something I wanted to raise about the component side as well, again, and how that whether if there are key differences there, or is this about the same? Is this about good practice and again making sure that we've just got, whether it's a simplified but, you know, broad way of upholding performance, or, you know, what does that mean from a control side?
From a components perspective, what we have to do is give the system the best chance to work as designed. So, you know, we don't want to start putting things like reduced board valves in there, or adding flow restrictions in, or you know, by way of componentry. So if we can design our componentry to work as efficiently as possible by that, you know, we're not reducing flow paths where they're not needed, you know, and giving the water that we produce, whether it be by a heat pump or a hybrid system, whatever it may be, the best chance to get around the system, then from our perspective, we have to do that. You know, filters with big surface areas, so we're not taking away flows. You know, all that sort of stuff is important to make sure that the efficiency remains high, and, you know, whatever heat source we're using as efficiently as possible.
Yeah. Fabulous, thank you guys. I know we're coming up.
One of my requests for people, for companies like Ed's, is to try and, if you look at like installations, you can see that you've got like 3 boxes on the walls with loads of wires going into them. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
what I'd like to see is all that simplified as we move forward. And I think we've done it because gas has been there for so long.
Yeah,
it's plug and play. You know, you put your boiler on the wall, you put your flue on, connect up your controls, and off you go. And I think heat pumps need to make sure, you know, heat pumps and hybrids need to make sure we get there as well. I think as technology develops, it will get better and better.
Of course.
And I think I like to see some of these pictures where it looks much, you know, nice as possible.
Yeah.
with less components in there that are sharing.
Yeah, which is something we try and, you know, we try and work on what we class as like monoblocks. So if we've got multiple valves that need to be used in one instance, we'll try and bring those into one hydro block or one block to be able to just sort of have in-out with safety devices or control devices all built into one. But, you know, it's trying to stay one step ahead of the curve, which sometimes isn't always possible, because you can be 6 months down the line of designing one system and something changes and it's just like, you know, it's not wasted, but you've got almost that on board at times. So.
Yeah, and I suppose scale comes into this as well. We're selling 1.4 million boilers a year. We're selling 70,000 heat pumps.
Yeah, and that will come. The scaling economy will come at some point.
Yeah, so investment and return doesn't always add up at the moment, does it?
Exactly.
I mean, there is a point someone in the audience had raised, funny enough, about end user understanding. And I know you'd mentioned that, Ed, a little bit there about, of course, hybrids, like every system, are going to be different, and there's sort of specific quirks, specific uses that need to be understanding. I guess that's industry side manufacturer. That
Yeah,
I think I probably brushed over it too brief, and I absolutely agree with what Stuart said. I've got the questions over. You know, yes, there's got to be an understanding from us as end users. You know, the way our heat is generated, and you know the way it should be used. So before we're so bad at misusing heat in this country, and I think we need to, you know, really need to understand it. And I think what the comment was absolutely correct. You know, yeah, understanding for end users is key as well. So.
Yeah, I think the end consumer, they hardly ever touches their heating system, and that's what they expect. It's, you know, you turn it on, it works, and that's what they're after.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the engagement, and I guess this with authority projects, things like that, that will make that interesting, about case studies, about how you can begin to do that. I know beyond individually on just going to Ed, how are we doing now? But actually, it's, you know, it's projects, and I guess demonstrations are, you know, and trials are how we hopefully get to a place where people can use it, or, you know, it can function with, where they're not having to essentially become sort of techies themselves beyond what you might hope there. I mean, to bring this, I mean, thank you, Bob. I know we can go on, and apologies in questions we haven't quite got ran to from the audience today there. But I was going to ask, just as a closing comments, I was going to go to Steve first and then finish off with Ed, as we're obviously associated with Altecnic on this one there. But just, I think, closing points about, you know, what do we need for next steps now? What's the best way to make sure that when we are, if hybrid is, you know, part of the arsenal there, that it's being used effectively, and, you know, and it's actually, we've got that end user buy-in. I know it's a huge one there, Steve, but if you were beginning to start, you know, particularly as we'll have some form of new government in this year, you know, where would we start to make sure that when we're going for hybrid, it's sort of maximised, or we're getting the best start we need?
From a government point of view, it would be nice to see some financial support for the hybrid. From an installer point of view, ensuring that we've got trained experts out there who have got the necessary knowledge and expertise to install these products in the right way. And the same as we would say with a boiler or heat pump, you know, you need a trained expert to do these installations. So yeah, it's let's see what happens. I think it's gathering a little bit of pace, Neil, now for the hybrid. We've lobbied government for quite some time now. I'd like to see some work done in the controls area, in the standards area, to make sure that we've got the right but, you know, necessary references. I know that I go onto a lot of Facebook type areas, and you see people in there say, you know, especially when you get into the electrical side, people reference, you know, the Bible of electricity, you know what I mean, which is the British standard, and they say this is what it says in clause 5.3.2. Do you know what I mean? So when you're getting down to that level, you know, you've got experts in there, and we've got to remember when we're fitting heat pumps and hybrids, there's an electrical connection in there, and some of that will be done by an electrician, some of it will be done by multi-skilled engineers. So let's make sure we've got them all trained, all know what they're doing. It's quite important, I think, that one, to make sure we've got safe consumers. Yeah,
I know with trains, thanks to, I think that's probably always a good one to look at with the training. It can be kind of easy to underplay that sort of, you know, we talk about the tech, but that human side, you know, we've got to make sure people have.
it was nice to hear today that people understand that engineers are going to take time out to do training, and you don't get paid any money when you do that. You know, you're not doing your job. So that's a key point. Then is 2 days or 3 days out is a lot of cash. And if I said to you, Neil, you're not going to get paid for 3 days because we send you on a training course, you're probably going to tell me, no, I'm not. But
I'm the company man. If my boss told me, I'd pretend. I'd go for that.
oh, dear.
But I think, but
you get the point.
Yeah, no, I do, and you know, as you said again, that human side, you know, it's easy again, the tech and the human side. This is often where we're very much in this industry. What makes it interesting is we're right at the front of bringing those elements together, not least with the end user as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking to Ed before this. You know, he's got a new house and family, etc., etc. 3 days' wages taken out, so he's not going to pay the mortgage, is it? So we've got to make sure we've got all this support in place to do this transition. It's quite important.
That's brilliant. And Ed, I think, you know, closing comments if I can. There's a lot to discuss, I know, but where we've come from.
I think there's been a couple of times mentioned before, you know, when you look at things like the boiler upgrade scheme and stuff, you know, it doesn't recognise things like hybrid technologies. It has to be embraced. Just because you're using a secondary source of heat doesn't mean it's a failure. It doesn't mean it's going to be any less efficient or whatever it may be. You know, I think it was mentioned before by Katrina, some of these hybrid systems operate far more efficiently than what a standalone heat pump can, or a standalone heat source can. So we have to embrace it. I think the government policy writers have to understand what hybrid means. Those sources can be, and incorporate it in towards a drive towards net zero.
Well, brilliant. Thank you. And I apologise. As always happens, we've brought some quite interesting conversation points and topics in there. But thank you for thank you both, Steve and Ed, on the final panel there. And of course, Ellie Hiscock and Katrina Young as well for today. I think that's brought us up quite nicely on time, he says ambitiously, but please do stay tuned. There'll be information for attendees on some of the slides that Ed had there earlier, and will also be coverage both online and in the July issue of H&V News, a bit more about some of the points we've discussed today. And I think as Steve's points out, that hybrid's going to be in many about in that broader way, along with standalone systems. But in the meantime, thank you once again to the panel, and indeed for you, our audience, for your time today, and hope to see you again soon for another H&V News Live. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Bill, thanks. Bye.
Bye.